I get the pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Ace Callwood. Ace has quite an impressive bio. And if you read his bio online, you'll learn about how he is a master facilitator, an entrepreneurship and innovation educator, a startup founder with numerous successes, and he's also experienced a few failures, as he detailed in his presentation at Richmond's Fuck Up Nights a few years ago. But if you really know Ace, you know that list doesn't actually convey the finer points, like how he thoughtfully and openly challenges systemic belief systems while discussing social issues, especially during late night porch sessions. He embraces the hard discussions and alternate perspectives to find paths towards understanding one another in our world, sometimes over alcohol. And he expertly moves issues forward with a human humility and a firm and gentle candor. He can also throw a mean paella party and knows how to build quite the campfire. He's always up for shenanigans. Unofficially, he holds the title Office Model at the Brand Scene, a workspace that I share with a fellow creative, Angela Prado, in the Museum District. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage one of the coolest dudes in Richmond and beyond, Ace Callwood.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. That intro, there's a world in which you just leave the meeting now. And by you, I mean me. I got to get out, given that was just a glowing intro from one of my favorite people. I cannot be the coolest guy or one of them in Richmond because I'm currently in St. Louis, but it's all good. I'll be back in Richmond this afternoon. So Creative Morning Richmond is being at least presented from the STL where I used to live for work. And so Michelle went into a little bit of my background. I'll kind of add some flesh to those bones, if you will, because I think the background is maybe helpful for contextualizing how I think about procrastination. So I have a degree in entrepreneurship from VCU, go Rams. Check back in like 20, 30 years. I'll tell you if that was a good investment or not. It's hard to say. I started my first company in school and failed spectacularly. So as an entrepreneur, I can check that off the list, tanked a company. Started my second company just out of school as I started teaching. So my longtime business partner and I got hired to redevelop curriculum for entrepreneurial education at VCU right out of school, which was rad. We got to dig into a lot of science and data and work with some of the smartest people in town. And then on kind of an insight that came out of that, we started a company called Coffeetivity. I will talk about that in a second. I'll procrastinate a little bit before I get to that company. Started a third company in 2015. I moved to Buffalo. So Jared, wherever you are, we popped up to Buffalo for a year for 43 North. Went to Techstars in Manhattan. So I moved into New York City, Manhattan, and then out to Brooklyn. And then I moved to St. Louis to work with a big client on that company. And then I tanked that company too. So we wound that company down 2019-ish. And then I transitioned to doing more and more facilitation and helping folks tell stories and have hard conversations, which is a thing I've kind of done woven throughout my career in the DEI world. But I've kind of stepped into being a full-time facilitator. So it's my job to help people tell stories, which starts us down our path of talking about procrastination. I'm a storyteller. Literally get paid to help folks figure out how they use their words and what they do with those. And I am my biggest fan and largest client in a lot of respects. I tell myself stories all the time, particularly when it comes to my work. It's really easy to make up a reason not to do a thing. It's really easy to talk yourself into doing a thing as well. And when it comes to the stack of stuff on my plate, from clients to family to my businesses to the relationships I have with dear friends, all of those things require time, they require energy. And for me, figuring out how and where and prioritizing is not a thing I've done particularly well over the course of my life. I've had some incredible people around to help me do that, to lean on and to hold me accountable. But personally, I tell myself stories about what I should do now and why I shouldn't do the thing that's probably important and that I should probably get done. As I was prepping for this talk and as I was talking to my team at Envoy about Creative Mornings and procrastination being the topic, both of the partners at the firm looked at me and just laughed. I think Scott tweeted something to the effect of, I don't know why I find it so enjoyable that Ace is talking about procrastination, but I do. Go check him out. And he posted a link. So wildly supportive office culture that we've built. But there's this running sub thread of, oh yeah, Ace procrastinates. As Stinson, the other partner, and I were chatting the other day, she asked me about getting a thing out of the queue. And I think I said something to the effect of, if it's not urgent, it's not important. And I live that way. And that's not a plug for creating urgency, but it is an understanding of, if you're a procrastinator, I see you. I think in coming into a talk like this, we're really probably oriented, particularly as we've got a lot of creatives and entrepreneurs in the mix, we're probably oriented to procrastination is this really powerful thing to harness. And it is. I want to spend a moment there for a second. I mentioned Coffeetivity, one of the companies that Justin and myself and Nicole and Tommy and a bunch of really cool folks around Richmond started in 2013. Coffeetivity is a workday productivity or creativity tool, as I like to call it. Very simply put, for folks who haven't engaged with that platform, it's a website that plays the background chatter and clatter of a cafe. We built a couple mobile apps as well, so you can download Coffeetivity or go to coffeetivity.com and use the free app that plays coffee shop sounds in the background. Now, for those not familiar with it, the question is often, why the hell would you do that? And the science is really important. What the science says is a moderate level of ambient noise is conducive to creative cognition. And for a layman like myself, what that means is having a tiny bit of distraction gets your creative juices flowing in the background. But if you go a layer deeper, that distraction is doing something really important. The distraction is allowing your brain time to work in the background on the creative problems that you've handed to it at some point over the course of your workday or your life or just the way that you're engaging with folks, right? Your brain is on in the background, and if we numb it a little bit, if we dull it a little bit, it's why some folks like to booze or smoke and then go get work done. Whatever that is, the coffee shop environment does the same thing. And that leads into procrastination in a really interesting way. I think as we harness procrastination as this thing that helps us get our work done, it's the act of putting things off. I think the definition is actually the action of delaying or postponing something. So academically, the definition of procrastination actually has no value judgment attached to it. It's not good or bad. It just is. It's the act of delaying or postponing something. And for a lot of us who find procrastination to be a powerful thing, it's because we've pushed the thing off and let our brain percolate on it in the background a little bit more. We're creating space for our mind to work through some issues, the kinks and the things that are slowing us down in the course of getting a thing done, be it work or life or otherwise. Our brain is working through the best way to go execute on that thing. And that's important. It is a powerful tool to harness, but it is a tool. And it's just a tool. Back to that definition, there's not really a value judgment on procrastination. So a lot of people feel shame, a lot of people feel power. And to understand that it's just a tool takes away some of the thing that we attach to procrastination, whether that's good or bad. And that's a personal judgment on whether or how we see procrastination. So understanding it as a tool starts to reframe the conversation around procrastination. I think about tools often, particularly in thinking through procrastination. I was thinking about a sledgehammer or a jackhammer for some reason. A jackhammer is a tool. It's great for redoing your driveway. Probably not as great for, picking something out of your teeth, right? And so a tool just is, and we have a myriad of tools in our toolbox. There are so many things we can pick for any given engagement. For me, I probably overuse the procrastination tool. And that's something I want to talk about. I want to talk about the downside for a second of procrastination. We get so much upside of pushing the thing off and being able to navigate the way we want to engage. But the downside can be really, really crippling. I worked for the Army Special Forces for a couple of years through high school into college. I was an instructor out on their Q course. At the very end of the qualification course, my job was to help them teach. That's a lot of what Special Forces operators do. They go into other countries and they teach the indigenous people how to defend their country and fight off whoever they need to fight off. And it was my job to help them better understand how they go relay information to folks. So teaching was at really the core of what I got to do for the Army. And one of the things we talked about often is a phrase I like to use. I use it in my professional life and I share it with friends. Control what you can control and influence the variables, right? Control what you can control and influence the variables. And procrastination kind of shows up in this realm in a lot of respects. What I see as we think about that tool that procrastination is, we have to think about the end result of using the tool, and often it drives to control. We are just so unmoored right now societally. We've got a global pandemic, this globally traumatic experience. We had the summer of racial reconciliation, or reckoning is probably a better word. And as much as we'd like for that summer to be over and George Floyd to be settled, we're in the middle of the Derek Chauvin case, and we saw a 13-year-old die by police brutality a day or two ago, and a 20-year-old earlier this week, and it feels like we're out of control. It feels like we don't have any agency and there's nothing we can control. And so we're just influencing variables. And I see procrastination show up in my life. It's a thing that I get to harness. It's a thing that I get to take control of when I start a thing, when I move a thing forward, when, or quite frankly, if I finish a project. And it's my way of taking back control in a world that is beyond controlling. It can be painful to desire control but not have it. It can also be painful to use a tool to find control in a way that is detrimental. I want to talk about my health for a second. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I came down with a headache and a cold. I had the sniffles, and my throat was sore. And of course, in the middle of COVID, all thoughts track to, well, maybe COVID, right? Except I'm fully vaccinated, and 2 COVID tests later, a PCR and a rapid, all negative. And then my chest started to feel like it was imploding, caving in, and that freaked me out. So I went to the doc, and I got an EKG, and I got a chest X-ray, and I got full blood work, and everything came back negative. And, at this point, at 30 years old, having a slow, prolonged heart attack is the only thing I can think about, right? My chest is killing me, and I feel like shit. And I'm trying to figure out what that is, right? And you go to the doctor to get answers. And when you leave the doc without answers, you have to go find answers somewhere else. And so I started digging, and I started talking to some of the people I love most dearly in this world. And a lot of what came back is you've got so much shit on your plate that you're not getting done probably in the way you should. I had taken that tool that is procrastination and over-indexed on it. I had used it way too much in a way that was negatively impacting my health. It was the first time stress and anxiety and pressure and the effects of procrastination had physically manifested in my own life. quite frankly, I was having an anxiety or a panic attack, and it was happening slowly. And for me, as this foreign thing that I hadn't experienced, I didn't know what it was. But as I started to get some clarity about what that might be, I snuck into the office, despite my mom and my partner and my colleagues and my friends saying, hey, you should go rest. You should go do nothing. I went and did something. I had looked at my queue, and I looked at the 20 or 30 things on the list, all moving from important to urgent because I had pushed enough off. And I just started knocking them out. And it was funny, over the course of 3 hours of getting work done, turned into 5 hours, turned into 9 hours, turned into 12 hours in the office on a Sunday, that weight on my chest started to lighten, started to lessen, started to loosen, until I walked out of the office and I said, holy smokes, I can breathe again. And so as we consider procrastination, there are kind of two sides of that coin, right? There's it can be powerful to harness and get some incredible things done, right? But it can also be detrimental to the quality of our work, to the relationships we have that we said, hey, I'm going to get this done, but I pushed it off a little too much. And ultimately to our own health, to the way that we exist in the world and breathe a little bit. Right. And so that tool is important to harness, but it's important to understand what and why we're trying to control a thing, and ultimately what the ramifications of taking that control and doing something with it might be. But that's not where I'm going to stop, as we've got a minute or two left. I want to jump to another big piece of this conversation, and maybe a third reframing, if you will. So I'm going to share my screen here in a second. Give me 2 seconds.
This is Alani. Alani is 7 years old from Belize and has severe scoliosis. Thanks to the World Pediatric Project, Alani is finally getting the world-class care she needs. Despite leaving her parents to travel with her grandmother across the globe to St. Louis, despite the discomfort of a carbon fiber halo, traction, and daily physical therapy preparing her for major procedures, Alani is still just a normal, precocious 7-year-old, playing video games, telling jokes, getting ready to live the rest of her life. And we get to tell her story.
So that's Alani. In the 30 seconds of that clip, you probably fell in love with her. We've been filming a documentary out in St. Louis about Alani, and it's a fundraiser for World Pediatric Project, our client. But we found this 7-year-old Alani who has a spinal deformity. She's got severe scoliosis. What her spine had done, this tiny little spine, like this is actually real size roughly. It was growing, and then it did this little loop over itself and then grew a little bit more. And so she's got kind of a loop-de-loop, literally what the doctor called it as we were interviewing him yesterday, a loop-de-loop in her 7-year-old spine. And so she was bent over, couldn't sit up straight. And ultimately, it was constricting her lungs. The deformity in her spine was constricting her lungs and her rib cage and her ability to grow. Ultimately, her ability to breathe. And I see that in a lot of respects as a proxy. It's maybe an analogy for how I think about procrastination without the value judgment, without the good or bad. I'd like to say, procrastination is a tool, right? But really, procrastination's a privilege. Alani, in any developed country, would have had a surgery to correct her scoliosis. She got spinal fusion here in St. Louis, world-class place to get this care. But she would have gotten the procedure at 3, maybe 4, and that might have been a little bit late. She's 7 now. And so her lung capacity was severely diminished over the last couple years as her spine has grown, but her ribs and her lungs have not been able to. Procrastination's a privilege. It is a thing that we are afforded and we can make a decision on, and taking that control and making the timeline of a project what we want it to be and pushing a thing off to get started. Those are all privileged things to be able to do. And this isn't the overarching, we're all privileged and we never have anything going on in our life and it could be that bad. But what I am saying is using that privilege. I talk in the DEI world often about privilege, and the point that I like to make when it comes to privilege is that I don't need an apology from anyone for having privilege. I don't need anyone to wear the sackcloth and walk through the streets saying I have privilege, woe is me. I need you to harness that privilege and do something with it, right? It's a powerful thing to be able to make some of the decisions we do when it comes to work and the things that we push off. And there are folks who aren't afforded the ability to make that decision, right? So that definition of procrastination, the act of delaying or postponing something, there are folks who have pieces or aspects of their life that they are pushing off because they have to. And when we talk about procrastination, at least the societal idea of what procrastination is, it's really about pushing a thing off because we want to. It's flexing that muscle. It's using a tool. And if we use that tool poorly, we may end up like me, questioning my health, or we may end up like Alani, who literally can't breathe because she's postponed or delayed a thing that needed to happen earlier in order to move forward and do all of the other things she wants to do in her life. So I'll wrap up here. As we think about procrastination, be it the powerful tool that it can be, the thing that creates space, the distraction, so our brain can work a little bit in the background and come up with incredibly interesting and compelling ideas. It can also be the sledgehammer that we're trying to use to floss our teeth and end up with a crushing weight on our chest. Or it can be the thing that we reframe as a privilege and use it as and where appropriate and set it aside when it's not. But the intentionality of how and where procrastination fits in our life and the decisions about what we're pushing off and what we're trying to control are infinitely helpful in reframing and understanding where, how, and when we use an incredibly powerful tool to get incredible things done. So with that, thank you. I appreciate the time, appreciate the trust, and I think we've got a couple minutes for Q&A.
We definitely have time for questions and would love to entertain whatever questions come about. I'm going to ask you a question before, as we're waiting for some to come in. When you and I first talked about you giving this talk, first of all, I had to tell Ace that I'm calling you about a topic and I don't want you to be offended.
Yeah.
But I also knew that you would give us the beautiful Ace insight that you just did. So I want to talk a little bit about privilege and the concept of balance that you and I spoke about.
Yeah. We talk often about balance, and I've got to balance all of these things in my life. And sometimes when there are too many things, it feels like juggling. And so, procrastination as a topic, a lot of people talk about balance as a way to solve for that. And I think balance is maybe the wrong word, right? Nuanced, but maybe not as powerful as it could be. I like to talk more often, particularly with clients and in storytelling and a lot of the work that I do. I like to talk a lot about rhythm. Right? The cadence of our work. Sometimes there's the cliche about a season or a time for everything, right? I think about rhythm. Sometimes, pushing things off is the right thing to create that space we need. And sometimes hopping on the thing as it pops up and doing it quickly and getting it out of the way so we can get to the next thing is right. And, as we think about balance, it's kind of like doing those things at the same time. I think rhythm starts to give us this, it gives us a visual, right? Balance talks about in the moment that we're holding two things and weighting them equal. And life isn't weighted equally. Work isn't weighted equally. Family versus work, given circumstances and the timing, sometimes one is weighted, sometimes the other. And so thinking about balance says these things are equal and I'm holding them equally. And rhythm is different. It says right now I'm doing this, and then I change pace or I change trajectory and I go do that. And so as I think about the rhythm of our work, the rhythm of our lives, it's a way that I frame how I consider my work and what I'm doing at some point and what's important to me right now in the rhythm of life. So that we were chatting about that, Michelle, and it's a thing that I like to share is, sometimes balance isn't the right way to look at things. Perhaps rhythm could be a good way to reframe.
We've got some questions. Jeff Schmidt, question number 2, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Thanks. Ace, thanks for speaking directly to my soul this morning. I think my question is, like, how did you stay focused, or did you stay focused? Like in that, like specifically in that 12-hour kind of work session that you just sort of felt overwhelmed and sort of knocked all that stuff out. Like, how did you stay focused in that? You have any tips or anything about how to actually continue to get work done instead of getting drafted? I'm definitely like the shiny object. Like, how do you kind of stay focused in the moment?
Yeah. Am I allowed in this venue to recommend drugs? I'm kidding. I was sober for at least that 12 hours. Afterwards, no promises. But it is hard. It's hard to dial in. A shameless plug, I suppose, for Coffitivity, but we built it, and that product, as meta as it was, we used the raw audio before we built a website or launched a product to build the product. And so, I've got this, like, I use that product regularly to dial in and get things done. And so Coffitivity is an important piece for me in the cadence or the rhythm of my work. I use it regularly. The other piece, and this is something we probably talk about. I'm sure Creative Mornings will have a multitasking theme at some point, if it hasn't already. Humans are not wired to multitask. Our focus ought to be, and should, the way our brain is wired at least, be singular. And so for me, I get distracted. I think, Jeff, just like you said, I want to do all of the things, but like my job is to find the one thing, prioritize appropriately, grab the one thing, knock it out, and then move to the next. And so creating lists for me is really important. I have a to-do list. What's interesting is I hate project management. And as my team's in the room, I see like half smirks in the background. Hate project management tools, but when I'm in a work session and running full speed, prioritizing, and my priority list is broken up into 2 or 3 segments. It's often really important, but a pain in the ass to get done. The second is really important, easy to get done. And the third segment is not important. And all of the unimportant things literally on my project management dashboards, the Asanas and the Trellos, I just have a list that is, I'm never getting that done. I'm never going to do it. And like, I gave myself permission, space to make that determination, like literally a list entitled never doing. And then we look at the other 2 lists, the important, pain in the ass, important, not a pain. And then I alternate. And so important, pain in the ass, like go knock one of those things out and then go to an easy task. So for me, that is the rhythm, that is the cadence that works. And I find that that's the thing that gets me moving through while I've got a little ambient noise or some sound in the background to keep moving. So Jeff, hopefully that's helpful.
That's awesome. Margaret is next and you're unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I was asking, I'm job hunting at the moment, and it is so easy to procrastinate on the job hunt because it's filled with so much silence is the general reaction, but also a lot of no. So how do you overcome something that is just filled with rejection? I mean, just so much of it is rejection. How do you overcome the procrastination on that?
That is an excellent question. It's hard, I wish I had some pithy, easy answer for that. The reality is we take more L's than we take W's. I'll kind of liken that to my startup experience in raising money. What they say is it takes 70 conversations to get a round of fundraising done. And it takes 4 yeses. So if you do the math, I think on the fly, that is 66 no's. And part of it is framing, right? Part of it is saying every no that I get is getting me closer to the yes, because we often anchor on the no. We often anchor on the somebody said I'm not good enough. And if we reframe that a little bit, it's somebody doesn't see how valuable I can be in their organization. And it's probably not where I need it to be anyway. Let's go find the person who sees that. That is the only thing that got me through fundraising, as I like to say, asking rich white men for money. The only thing that got me through that process is understanding that if they didn't see it the way that I saw it, we probably weren't a good fit. And the no was requisite to go find the 4 yeses in the midst of those 66 no's. So reframing a little bit and shifting the story that we tell ourselves is really helpful, because often we get anchored to that somebody said I'm not good enough. Fuck that somebody. That's really how I feel about it. Let's go find the somebody who says you're awesome and you should be here.
Rocks. Gail, go ahead.
Good morning, Ace. I wondered how your team helps you leverage the gifts of your procrastinating without feeling like they're being taken for granted. I understand you've got some of your team in the room with you, and I'm sure some of them are nodding their heads.
Scott's just laughing.
It's something I've heard about myself, so help me with that.
Yeah. A part of it is creating space. As I think about Stinson Mundy, one of the partners at Envoy, just incredible. She's a former litigator, and she's still got lawyer brain, right? I'm a suit. I come out of the business school, but very much identify with the creatives. And so I get to head in the clouds, go be. And as I was talking to Stinson, I said, look, if it's not important, I'm only doing it when it's urgent, right? So there is a balance there in that Stinson understands the timelines and the deadlines for our work, and plug some of that into my project management software. And then, of course, she tells me, look, you need to be in Asana. And so she's created some structure for me. And as much as I want to be the free spirit flowing, I like being told what to do every now and then. It's really nice, particularly for some of us who own our own businesses or are put in positions to make decisions often. Somebody making a decision for you is a really powerful thing, and it takes a load off. So Stinson put a block on my calendar every Monday, and she said, this is your admin time. This is when you do admin. And she bought me a pack of Juicy Juices, and she said, as soon as you get I'm a big Juicy Juice guy, love a juice box. If you want to send me anything ever, like juice pouches or juice boxes, it's important to the story, I assure you. She bought me 12 pack of juice boxes, and she put it on my desk and said, when you get your admin time set up and you get in the cadence weekly of doing this and looking at the spread for the week, you get to open the Juicy Juices. And I said, hell yeah, that is incentive enough. And also I see you supporting me doing some things that it's funny, procrastination is powerful for me, but I feel guilty as well. I feel guilty to put some burden on the rest of the team. And that rhythm, I think, is important to say. Stinson stepped in and did the things that are important to her strengths and also give her stress if they're not handled appropriately. And she reframed them and plugged them into my life in a way that I could see them and feel receptive about some critique, but some acknowledgement of this is who you are. This is what I need in the course of you being who you are. And this is how we move forward as a team. So there's a lot of support that comes with that. And I've got to give a little bit to make sure I fit and I'm not the one dragging or slowing us down in the pursuit of being awesome.
Awesome. Allison, you had a question?
Sure, yeah. So Ace, I think you might have answered my question a little bit when you were talking about how you made your list, and you have different lists for the things that are easy to do, hard to do. I find that when I leave everything to the last minute, and there's a lot of it, my biggest problem is figuring out where to start. It's looking at it and it's like, oh my God, I'm just going to walk back away because I don't even know where to begin. And so beyond list, and because I like having my check boxes, I went to a actual planner because I like checking it off and it makes me feel good. And I write stuff down that I've already done just so I can check the box. But beyond that, how do you approach that amount of work that took you 12 hours?
Yeah, it's daunting, right? And that's kind of it's counterintuitive. We push so much stuff off and then it piles up. And then the things we didn't plan for, right? If we've got 10 things that we planned for and are pushing all of them off, and then we end up sitting down to look at the 10 things, it's actually like 15 or 20 because life has happened in the course of that. And so we go into this triage mode, and it's why I talked about like my health, right? Like that triage, that sustained, prolonged, heightened stress is not good for us, particularly over an extended period of time. So being really intentional about cutting that list down is important. I think as I think about triage, getting the never going to do off the list is actually a really good way to clear space to figure out where to start. A lot of times, if you've heard the phrase, your lack of planning does not constitute my emergency. A lot of people put their stuff on our list with an expectation that it is important to us. And often it's not. So I'd say of any list that I end up with in front of me, there's probably 30 to 50% of stuff that I really shouldn't have to deal with. And I'm probably not going to deal with and shouldn't have been on my list in the first place. Find those things and cut them. And then once you've freed up some space to start looking at what's actually important, there are a lot of ways to start understanding that. Which piece are you, or which item are you really, really hesitant to get started on? I might start on that one. Which one do you need information from other people? I might send those quick notes, right? If we break some of the big tasks down into subtasks, we can get things started so they're moving while we're working on something else. Often, particularly in the DEI world, but it translates here, I talk about the high impact items on our DEI to-do list in an organization, but I also talk about the quick wins. Quick wins are important psychologically to start building momentum. So I'd say find 2 or 3 things that are really, really easy and just start finding some W's, right? Control what you can control, influence the variables. You might take an L on something on your list, but if you've manufactured a couple quick wins, that starts to get the ball rolling in the course of getting to some of the hairier stuff that might not work the way you want it to. And then lastly, there's this element of saying and doing what we say we will. If we've got folks waiting for a thing or in the queue, we might be really intentional about those interpersonal relationships and knock those out first. So I've just given you 4 or 5 ways to think about it, but that triage process is important. The one that I like is finding the quick wins and building momentum into some of the bigger things, but a couple ways to tackle that, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Emily is our last question. And we've gotten so many responses on the how-tos, so I'm going to quickly drop a list in the chat as well before the meeting ends if you want to screenshot it. All right, go ahead, Emily.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm curious around that time when you were in physical distress, how you decided that work was what you needed versus rest.
Yeah, part of it's probably being somewhat a smidge of a contrarian. Everybody said I needed to rest, and you listen to the people you love until you don't, is how I operate. But no, I did the things that I thought I ought to do, particularly with respect to my health. So you want to make sure you're not jeopardizing anybody else's health. And so you lay low. So I had some client work that week and had to bail on the trip. So I sent the 2 teammates who were going, they went down without me. Testament to having an incredible team that you trust and know that you don't have to be in the mix for every single engagement. But I punted a trip. I felt all the guilt about that. And I went and got my tests. So I went and got the 2 COVID tests. And then I went back to urgent care and got the EKG and the blood work and the chest x-ray, and everything came back negative. And so you just go down the list of, okay, what else might be going on in my life? And, it's perhaps fortunate that I've been thinking about the somatics of late, particularly as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, to answer your question, Gail. Somatics and how our body responds to external stimuli and stressors, and how we hold some of the things in our body and how that manifests. I've been thinking about that with respect to racial equity, et cetera. And then in sharing with friends that my body was doing a thing, a lot of the feedback was maybe that's stress, maybe that's anxiety. And then kind of the last piece for me was laying in bed, resting as I was supposed to. It just felt like it was getting worse. Right. And listening to your body, listening to your brain is really important. And so for me, I felt a thing. I felt that it was worsening. I was feeling more pressure, more anxiety, and said, hey, maybe. I mean, what's the worst that happens? I go into the office, I get a bunch of shit done, and then I die, at least I got stuff done, but maybe it solves my problem. And so I tried it. A lot of what we have to do in navigating procrastination or other facets of our life is just try some things. And I had gone down the list of where I should have started. I now got to, let's be creative about finding a solution to a thing happening. So it was a test. It just happened to work. I didn't know for sure, but I thought maybe the pile of stuff stacking up might help me get through or out of this thing that I'm feeling.
Ace, thank you so very much for tackling this topic for us. I actually feel a heck of a lot better about all the things that I've been procrastinating on. So I don't know if that was the intent, but I love the humor and humility you have brought to this topic. So thank you again for joining us, and safe travels back to Richmond. And for everyone else, please go check out Ace's bio and his portfolio and his site. His Twitter handle and his Instagram handle are in the chat. And for everyone else, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to invite you all to join us next month on Friday, May 21st, for a theme that will be resonant for everybody here after this past year. As we go, I want to leave you with one final message on today's topic. It's been said that procrastination is a thief of time. If you're putting something off, do so with awareness, intent, and grace. Don't miss the moment you're worrying about because you're putting something off. That's how you miss everything. So go and procrast mindfully, and we will see you here next month.